Welcome to you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We are pleased to kick off yet another Coacharya Colloquium. I am so pleased to have joining us this time Ashok Malhotra, who will be talking about the Jung frameworks and tools. It is going to be a very fruitful conversation, and you're going to learn a lot. We will be sending out the CCEUs about 1 hour after this presentation. If tomorrow you don't receive something, you can let us know, but otherwise, for all of you who are on, we will be sending that out. So I'd like to welcome Ashok Malhotra. How are you?
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much.
Yes, well, great. So welcome everyone. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will be taking your questions as we go. We've had some people say that they can't hear. Okay, so I'm going to lean into my computer. I think that helps. So, Ashok, can you give us kind of the framework for the Jung and what inspired you to create this assessment tool?
A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you, Coacharya, for giving me this opportunity to share and talk about Jung framework and tools with this very distinguished set of people. To respond to your question, Karen, I think what inspired me to create Jung is my ambivalence towards frameworks in general. I like them. I love them, in fact. They're very necessary, but I also find them very restrictive. So frameworks help you to structure your thoughts. You know, when one is thinking, thoughts don't flow in any logical, sequential, linear manner. So you are thinking of something and suddenly something totally irrelevant will pop up. Maybe a song, that you may have heard many, many years back, or some memory may just pop up. So thoughts come like that. There is a fluidity to them. And if one has to be focused, one needs a structure, one needs a framework. Simultaneously, these frameworks also end up becoming restrictive. They decide what is relevant and what is not relevant. And it becomes very difficult to step out of the framework. So I think I was one of the things which prompted me, and my need was to have a framework which has a structure, but which is also sufficiently open-ended to provide a fair degree of, elbow room, fair degree of openness, that one can, deploy it and yet not become a captive of it. I think Jung, in a sense, is an attempt to create such a framework. Have I answered your question?
Yes, you have. So why don't we get into the first slide, and you can give us a little bit more of a sense of what you mean about being restrictive and not restrictive. And maybe you can adjust your sound, Ashok. I can hear you, but I've put my sound up loud. So if you just can turn your volume up, I think that would help.
Okay, I shall try and do that. How do I do that now? It is.
It may be, let's see. There might be a little speaker where you can just slide the volume up. I don't see it on my control.
Okay, let me see, where is the volume?
Oh, they can hear you now. I think it's just leaning.
They can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
All right.
Great.
Yeah, so just go to the next slide. There we go.
Okay, so let me begin by sharing as to what Hume is. The full form of Hume is Existential Universe Mapper. It's a comprehensive framework which facilitates understanding of individuals, of oneself, of course, of other people, and collectives. And by collectives, I mean groups, families, teams, departments, organizations, communities, society, and relationship between the individual and these collectivities. That's what Hume is all about. It has three main components. One is Hume individual, that is Hume I, Hume O, which maps the organization, and impact, which looks at the relatedness between the individual and the organization. In this webinar, we will not be touching upon impact. We will only be talking about Hume I and to some extent about Hume O. The framework has two main sources of inspiration. One is Graves' work on theory of levels of existence. And the framework has strong resonance with Indian approaches like pluralism, non-linearity, holism, context sensitivity. I think some of these will become clearer as we move along. So I'm not going to spend too much of time on what these mean just now.
Yeah, that's good.
So let me say in terms of what the framework is. The framework posits 6 universes which reside within each individual. Now, this is where the Graves influence comes in. Graves, in his work with people, his position was that there is no point trying to understand an individual piecemeal. You can't look at an individual in terms of needs and desires and attitudes and behaviors, etc. One has to look at the individual as a composite whole. And his research showed that individuals, what he called, exist at 8 levels. And he posited 8 levels of existence. With each of these levels is a composite system of needs, wants, attitudes, beliefs, values, and propensities. In Hume, we don't take the first two and we don't use the term level, we use the word universe. The reason would become apparent as we go along because levels has a connotation of something is higher and something is lower, something is superior and something is inferior. And then there are other departures from Hume because levels mean that you are at one level or at another level. Whereas in Hume, the position is that these universes exist simultaneously and they are in constant interaction with each other. So like Graves, Hume also accepts that these universes are evolutionary, but they are not hierarchical, that one is not superior to another. They are evolutionary only to the extent that, in terms of chronology, that the first universe is awakened first, and how one's experiences are in the first universe, it impacts how you will engage with the second universe and so on. So it's evolutionary only to the extent that the earlier levels or the earlier universes determine the degrees of freedom for the later universes. It is not teleological or hierarchical that in terms of, that one is all stepping. It's not like a ladder. So there is a simultaneity to it. Now, if I was to contrast this with Maslow, for instance, I'm sure everyone knows about Maslow. So you're not saying here that, whether you are motivated by safety or by affiliation or by ego need. What is being stated here is that all these are at play at the same time. And how they interact with each other is what is important. The final element of the framework is that the instruments map degrees of identification, distinctiveness, and valuing of these universes. Now, what typically, like a the Hume in tool, that is Hume I and Hume O, it's a very simple tool. In Hume I, we have 15 adjectives, and in Hume O, we have 20 adjectives. And the person is to rank these adjectives along 3 columns. One, in terms of self-current, in terms of how the individual sees herself. Second, in terms of self-ideal, how the person would like to see. And third is your perception of most other people. Now, the reason why we have these 3 is because whenever a person is saying something about himself or herself, you need to know as to what is the reference point and what is the feeling tonality with which that statement is being made. So if you say, I'm very expressive, that doesn't tell me whether you see other people equally expressive or less expressive than you. Or you say that I'm very self-centered. I don't know whether you feel good about it or you don't feel good about it. So I need to know what is the reference point that you are using. So whether I'm also saying, it's one thing to say that I'm very self-centered and I feel good about it. And it's quite another thing to say that I'm very self-centered and I feel guilty about it. It's one thing to say that I'm very self-centered, but so are other people. And it's quite another thing to say that I'm very self-centered, but others are not. So what's the real nature of the statement? You need reference points. And in that sense, in Hume, you map the self-current, the self-ideal, and also your perception of other people. Let me go on and say in terms of how Hume differs in a manner of speaking from traditional psychometry. And that will perhaps answer the question in terms of it being structured and yet being open-ended. And here, when I'm using the word traditional psychometry, I don't mean all psychometric instruments, but by and large, the field of psychometry that I'm talking about. So you see, one of the basic differences, and this is all the other differences flow from this, that whereas in traditional psychometry, by and large, self is regarded as a noun. And so you say, okay, what the instrument is doing, it's putting the self under the microscope and then deciding what are the properties of this self, what are its attributes, what are its qualities, what are its elements. In contrast, in Hume, self is not held as a noun, but as a verb. It's like an ever-flowing river, which is continuously moving. And as they say that you can't step into a river, into the same river twice, because it's all the time it's moving. So it's a configuration. It's a dynamic configuration which is taking place. There is no difference between, and if you put a person under the microscope, you will find the same elements that you will find in any other person. What you will find different is the configuration of these different elements. So in Hume, the emphasis is understanding configurations. Therefore, typically in traditional psychometry, you would focus on types, traits, and measurements. Okay, in what type of a person is this, or what are some of the traits, and how does the person measure, on these. Whereas in Hume, you look at what are the patterns and what is the interplay. Similarly, if it's a flowing river, then it necessarily means that the context plays a huge role. So whether that, whether the river is passing through lush green meadows or it's passing through rocky, terrains, will determine what the nature of that river at that point in time is. So the context plays a huge role in our understanding when we look at Hume. Similarly, in traditional psychometry, you would administer a test and you give feedback to the individual. And in the process of giving that feedback, Either you affirm the person's self-concept, or you challenge it, or you explain it. In Hume, you do not, none of these things. In Hume, you say, this is the way this person sees himself or herself. And that's the starting point. You put that perception in the context of how this person is seeing the world, what this person is feeling about it, and what would this person like to do? How would this person like to reconfigure? So in Hume, you don't focus on strengths and weaknesses. You don't say that you need to improve on this. What you focus on Hume is on accepting multiple parts of yourself. So you don't say you are not this. What you say is you are this, you are that, and you are more. And can see how you can uh, use the potential of those parts of yourself which you are not acknowledging and not gracing. Let me stop here for a moment and see whether I've made any sense, or if there are any questions or any comments till what we have covered so far.
Well, lots of good comments. Francois has said, I really love Ashok's articulation, best expression of integral coaching I've heard. A lot of people like the whole notion of self as noun versus self as verb. They find it very insightful. They love the idea. And so lots of excellent feedback as it relates to that. And also, I should say that Magna posted the blog on the Hume Existential Universal Map as well. So be sure to go in the chat and grab that. But yes, continue, because people are loving the explanation that, Carol says, it seems like psychometry is more definitive, yet Hume is a lot expressive in this case.
That's right.
So, and then Viji has asked for an example. Can you give an example that explains the noun versus the verb?
What explains the noun versus the verb? All right. Let me give an example in terms of the traits, etc., which perhaps will help in understanding this. Like, for instance, in Hume, you do not say whether a person is introverted or extroverted. You say under what circumstances will this person reach out and connect with people, and in what circumstances will this person withdraw into the self. Right? So we are not saying that this is an object which is an introverted object or a extroverted object. You do not say whether this person is high on influence skills or low on influence skills. You say what is the way this person would influence, in what situation would she try and influence, and in what situation would she not try and influence. So you're always looking at the person in a context. You're saying, oh, because this is again partly, I think, also, I think, Eastern and particularly Indian way. Like, I'm sure many of you who have worked with Indians would find that whenever you ask them anything, they will ask you counter. In what situation? If I'm at my home, I'm like this. At my office, I'm like this. With some people, I'm like this. With some people. So they all the time, for them, context is so important that they all the time putting themselves and saying, okay, how do I learn to deal with different types of context? So therefore, that's the essential difference. That we say that the self has everything, but this self, part of those self, will get activated in different situations. Have I answered that question?
Yes, and as a follow-up, Viji is asking, so there's no person-specific evaluation or judgment on that person. Is that a correct understanding?
Well, as far as evaluation and judgment is concerned, the answer is yes. As far as recognition of patterns is concerned, the answer is no. Because there are certain patterns which individuals have. And you try and understand the patterns which are governing the movement of this dynamic configuration. So you are decoding, in a sense, if I may use the word, the underlying, um, risk, I don't know what, call it DNA or whatever, the codings which are there, which are determining certain kinds of patterns. So you're all the time looking at patterns. So yes, there is no judgment or finality, but there is certainly a recognition of the pattern. And the emphasis in Jung, particularly in the coaching context, is to open dialogue. So you all the time try and see what are the opportunities which are available to open dialogue with this person.
And just, I think to further, hopefully, to further emphasize the point, you talked about the river is never the same.
Yeah.
And when you step your foot in, I'm just highlighting the point that you're looking for patterns. So when the river goes through the lush meadows, it probably has a similar pattern, not identical, but it certainly flows, similarly, depending on what's in the meadow. And equally, when it's in a rocky area, it's going to have more waves, more crashing. And if it hits boulders, obviously that's going to have a much bigger splash. But still, there are patterns within that context.
Also, the river has a movement of its own.
Yes.
It has a certain, mobility, a certain velocity, a certain configurations, which it has. And so it's flowing in, both, it's responding both to its internal momentum as also to the external context. In a sense, I'm saying a very similar thing to what Kurt Lewin said, that behavior is a function of self and situation. In a sense, I'm saying a very similar thing, that except that I'm not looking at self as a object. I'm saying it's an ever-flowing configuration. And this configuration continues to find, in a sense, an equilibrium with its context. Sometimes that equilibrium is very satisfying. Sometimes that equilibrium is very stressful.
Right.
So it continues to find an equilibrium with the context in which it is.
Yeah, and we have another comment from Sarwathi that is, so the Hume explains that in such situations, one behaves like this. Would these situations be generalized? That's one part of the question. And the other part is, as to have many unique situations, would it be difficult for any algorithm to capture that?
Absolutely. Every situation is unique. All that you can say is, by and large, tendency would be such.
Yeah.
That they would be that a person in a situation which is threatening, right, is more likely to become aggressive. A person in a threatening kind of a situation is more likely to withdraw into the self. So these are very broad patterns, but you cannot say that it's applicable to every situation, because every situation has multiple things. So there are only broad patterns that one can talk about.
So there's a common and a unique aspect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's continue.
Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay. So let's look at these 6 universes that we talked about in the Jung framework. Now I'm going to go over them very quickly. There are basically 6 universes, and I'm giving them both in terms of Jung I and Jung O, that is individual and organization. There is a parallel between them, that they essentially respond to the same kinds of forces. So at the individual level, the first universe is what we call the universe of belonging and protection, where the primary need is to have a safe haven, to have a place to belong to have your anchors, your tradition, your heritage, and stuff like that. The organizational equivalent of that is what we call a clan. Right? So naturally, if there are people who have very high on UBP, they're likely to end up creating a clan organization. right? And if you are in a clan organization and you're not very high on UBP, you're likely to feel like a misfit. So, there is this interface becomes very important. The second is what we call at the level of the individual is the universe of strength and desire, where the entire emphasis is on I'm someone. This is my life. I have certain needs and I'm strong enough. I can look after myself. I need to. So it's really that you are discovering your own potency and your own aliveness. It's also the source of a lot of creativity, a lot of passion, zest for life. It's also a source of a lot of aggression, a lot of conflict, and stuff like that. The organizational equivalent of that is what we call arena, where you are, it's almost a stage where you are, you know, high competitiveness, where there are all the time wanting to showcase your talent and stuff like that. In the third universe is what we call universe of roles and boundaries. Now, the first universe, as we said, was in terms of safety and belonging. The second universe is where you say, I'm somebody, that's much more individualistic. In the third universe, which is universe of roles and boundaries, you learn to establish a reasonably stable equilibrium with the world. And the way of doing is through clarity of expectations. This is what I can give, and this is what I can expect in return. What is expected of me, and what I can expect. So in organizational terms, this translates into clockwork. So these are systems where everything is determined, everything is laid down, procedures are given. And so they are very high in terms of predictability, right? But they also it's very difficult for them to deal with anything which is unexpected. The fourth universe is what we call the universe of purpose and achievement. Here, one is going beyond establishing an equilibrium with the other, where one is saying that how can I be a resource to the other, and how can other be a resource to me? How can we join together to work towards, goals which will fulfill my needs and fulfill the other person's needs? So there is a lot of emphasis in this universe on forging mutually beneficial relationships. The organizational equivalent of that is network, where you say that every individual is an autonomous node, and this node is connected to various other nodes. Unlike clockwork, where the entire connection is through hierarchy and through structure, here the networks are broad. The fifth universe is universe of meaningfulness and intimacy, where you are in a sense going beyond and saying, okay, what is it which gives me a sense of fulfillment? What am I contributing? What is it my quality of my relatedness with the world? It's not just a question of purpose, achievement, and stuff like that. And the organizational equivalent is what we call ecology. The final universe is universe of duality and simultaneity, where you, in a sense, recognize that in life there are always opposite forces. And how do you hold these opposite forces together is what is significant. This was incidentally another significant reason for development of Hume. My discomfort with binaries, my discomfort with, saying this is either this or that. As we say that existential ambivalence is inherent to being human. And in that, rather than polarizing the ambivalence and saying this is good and this is bad, this is right and that is wrong, how does one learn to deal with them simultaneously? The organizational equivalent of this is what we call holonic. The term holonic comes from what Coacharya has called a holon, which means that everything in this world is simultaneously a part and a whole. Everything is whole in itself. And everything is also a part. Like a word is whole and complete in itself, but it's part of a sentence. A sentence is whole complete in itself, but it's part of a paragraph, and so on and so forth. So everything in a sense is a holon. So holonic means recognizing both the parthood and the wholeness.
Yes,
I'm not going to go into the details of Hume. I think I just
but
flip through
okay.
okay, the
Yes,
various
I was
features of,
just gonna say
yeah,
you
yeah,
have
Karen, come on, yeah,
a couple of comments.
yeah,
Is this somehow associated with the chakras?
with the
Chakras.
chakras.
Yes.
Oh, who asked that?
Jackie.
Yes, absolutely, it is. There's
Okay.
a close parallel.
Okay.
In fact, there was a lot of influence of Sri Aurobindo's work on Ken Wilber, right? And who has developed a very similar thing, and in spiral dynamics. Spiral dynamics also has a similarity with this. The spiral dynamics, in my view, is a lot more normative. Yes, it has a parallel with chakras. That's right.
Okay. And then another comment was, this is amazing. It looks like I'm getting a new hunch on what leadership pipeline, starting with self, clan, belonging, and
Yeah.
protection should really look like. And that's from Carol.
Okay. Yes, we have. As I said, there are three distinct, in fact, elements, but we also have a detailed a perspective on leadership, which is again based on four basic polarities. I'm not going into that in terms of what are some of the things which are entailed in it.
Okay, so continue.
So I'll just quickly take you through. I'm not going into Hume because we don't have the time. So I'll just take you through the Hume I universes, and I will not read it out. Everyone can see the screen, I presume.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just take them, and if there is a question, I'll respond to that.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Okay, this is the first universe.
Okay. People are absorbing. So what you can see is that it's around values, loyalty, obviously the sense of security, tradition, heritage.
That's right.
Yeah, trust, faith. So let's proceed to the next one. There's passion, emotionality, impulsivity.
That's right.
Self-belief and confidence.
Self-delusion also.
Yes, also some delusion. Relationship with authority, some doubts and testing, strong opinions, either me or they're for me or against me.
See, like in UBP, the essential stance towards authority is one of dependence. Here it is of counter-dependence. So the authority has to prove itself before it can be yielded to.
And then roles and boundaries is around order, stability, values hierarchy and norms, policies, rules, fairness, objective, self-regulated. Yeah.
There's a fear of subjectivity, and it can end up becoming dogmatic.
Mm-hmm. And that last point about black and white and not seeing the gray in between.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to have an absolute this thing, that this is the way things have. In a sense, you have established a reasonably workable interface with the world. And now you hold on to that interface for dear life.
Mm. And then purpose and achievement is around aspiring, looking for success with some mutual benefit, focus on relationships, but they can also become an island
Yeah.
and can burn out with the relentless need for improvement. Would that also be known as perfectionism?
No, perfectionism is not so much here.
Okay.
Perfectionism is more a URB phenomena. Here it is more enlightened self-interest. Right? So there is a much more, this universe people are a lot more flexible. They will see what works for their individual goals and for the collective goal. Whereas perfectionism, of course, is a broad term, but perfectionism in the sense of this is the only right thing is the URB phenomena.
Got it.
So if perfectionism comes with a overly defined perfection state, that would be a URB phenomenon. Because the problem with perfectionists, is not that they are only striving. The problem with perfectionists is that their idea of perfection is frozen in time.
Mm.
They think this is what perfection is, and they are not willing to review that. So when I say it's a URB phenomena, I'm talking it in that sense.
Yes. And part of what you're saying about Hume is there's always the interplay between the context and the self. And so nothing is ever locked in. It is always fluid, flowing, we're growing, we're sometimes retreating, but generally we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay. And for meaningfulness and intimacy, it's around quality of life, relatedness, and relationships are valued over achievement. Obviously, intimacy, being authentic.
So you see, if UPA, Universal Purpose and Achievement, has a much greater tilt towards pragmatism, here the tilt is a lot more towards romantic idealism, how things ought to be or how one wishes them to be.
So someone is asking,
Yeah.
what is the relevance of the universes in understanding a person? What does understanding of the universes lead or help them with?
All right. Okay. See, here the assumption is that every universe has something to teach us. When we assimilate the learning of that universe, and then when the next universe awakens in us, it will have a certain quality. But if I've not learned the lesson of the earlier universes, then those unlearned lessons will continue to operate even in the later universes. So what you do in Hume is to try and understand what are some of the lessons of the various universes which the individual has learned and has not learned, and how it may be impacting the individual's interfaces with the world. Let me give an example. Let's say if in UBP, which is the first universe, you have learned, with the basic thing to be learned in UBP is the ability to put down your roots and to have trust. If you have learned how to have trust and know how to put down your roots, chances are that your USD, you will have a much greater playfulness and a much greater aliveness and zest for life and much less reactivity around it. But on the other hand, if you have not learned the lessons, or if your experience has been such where there has been failed dependency, where you have not been able to, for whatever reasons, you have not really been able to trust the world, then in your USD, you will bring in that much more reactivity and anger and aggression. So it will not be very, because USD has both a playful element and an angry, aggressive. So which element gets activated depends on what the configuration of other universes is. So you are actually, what you do when you work with people, you look at what is the nature of interplay between these five universes which is operating. So it is possible that for some people, some of the universes may become so loud that the other universes are not heard. For some people, some of the universes may become muted. Now, just because they are muted, it doesn't mean that they are, they stop being influencing you. Like if, in India, for instance, by and large, our experience has been that people, and our data shows that generally people have a lot of difficulty with the second universe, which is the universe of strength and desire. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us. How it affects us is either through passive aggression or through projecting it onto other people. So what you try and work with you is to see what are some of these voices which are intrinsically, each of them is very healthy and very much needed. But whose lessons does one need to, in a sense, learn? What are some of the baggages that one may be carrying? So, irrespective of whether you have learned the lessons of the few universes or not, you will still move to the other universes. The other universes will get awakened, but you will be carrying. So you're actually in Jung, you look at the pattern, you look at the configuration. So the inter-universe dynamics, and that's a major departure from spiral dynamics. In spiral dynamics, you don't look at the inter-level issues as much as you do in Jung. In Jung, you are all the time, a large part of the analysis comes from inter-universe. And a large part of it comes through in terms of how you are seeing the world and what's the kind of, position that you're taking. That's what you do with Jung.
So we've got a couple of questions here. As
Yeah,
you can
sure. Yeah.
One is, do the experiences create some predominances in similar contexts for different individuals? In other words, in some people, it's going to be their nature. In some people, it's a nurture. How does that figure with the predominance of some of the universes?
Well, certainly all of us are born with some genetic coding, and all of us also have certain contexts in which we are brought up, and we have our own life experiences. Like I was giving the example of, particularly the first two universes, the UBP and USD, how they are negotiated and dealt with have a fairly significant impact. In fact, in identity formation, these are the two universes which we pay maximum attention to. Our effort in Hume is not to say how to take everyone to UDS or UMI or anything like that. Our attempt is essentially to understand what is the nature of configuration, like the example that I gave you of if your UBP is experiences of failed dependency, or if in USD you have experienced extreme punitiveness or extreme restrictiveness, they all impact. And then they are shown up in other universes. A typical example would be, for instance, people who are unable to grace the USD will use rules and boundaries to exercise power. So no, they become gatekeepers of, so their basic source of power then comes from adherence to rules and become disciplinarian. So there is what kind of propensities gets generated is very much dependent upon the kind of patterns that we have in the interplay of the five universes. Have I answered that question?
I believe so. I'm going to try to punctuate it. So what's resonating for me is that our experiences certainly influence the universes that we're moving through.
Yeah.
And any issues or dilemmas that we haven't worked out will
Sure.
continue to repeat themselves until we address them.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
But it will not preclude us from moving through the other universes.
Absolutely.
We're going to continue to do that and evolve, but what may show up
Yeah.
for us is what I would call overcompensation. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
you talked about, you know, unresolved aggression may mean that we're forceful in how we approach others.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I'm going to put a pin in that, and then I'm now going to address. Adams has two questions. Adam says, how does the theory of karma relate to the model? And how is transcendence and unchanging consciousness integrated in the model?
Theory of karma, I have no view on.
Okay.
All I know is about the karmas of this life.
Okay.
I do not know whether there was any previous life or there wasn't any previous life. But as far as the karma of this life is concerned, it totally resonates with it. That whatever choices, actions that you take will continue to will have some impact, intended or unintended. And you cannot get away from it. Those will need to be dealt with. So in that sense, it completely resonates. But if theory of karma is being associated with previous birth and all that, then I don't know. I don't have a view on the matter. But theory of karma for this one, yes. Right? As far as the transcendence thing is concerned, here essentially the position is that if you have learned the lessons of the earlier universes, then when the new other universes awaken, you will in a sense include all those learnings and transcend. So the transcendence will not be of suppression. The transcendence it will follow the basic evolutionary principle of include and transcend. So that's see, the other major way in which Hume is used is, can I go on, Karen?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Is by seeing how one holds, when we use Hume I and Hume O together, we see how is this person holding the system in the mind. Now, what the person holds as a system in the mind may have something to do with the system's actual reality, but may also have a lot of projections which the person is making on the system. Right? So therefore, if a person again has a very low tolerance for USD, it is possible that the person may experience the system as a lot more arena-ish than it actually is. So when you're working with people, you're constantly looking at how the person is also looking at the system in the mind and what responses is this person is making, and help the person see how some alternative responses are possible. So the context in that sense comes very alive when one is working with you. Yes, Karen. Any other question? Hello, I can't hear you.
I muted myself. I apologize.
Okay, all right.
Another question is, as a coach, I can see there is a better possibility of arriving at self-awareness that is more wholesome. And can I accept that simultaneously?
Yeah. I haven't followed that question.
I think what they're asking is, as a coach, there's a better possibility to create self-awareness.
Yeah.
That the person is whole, you know, they have to the point you were making, the individual has lessons they need to learn,
That's
but
right.
they also have potential.
Mm-hmm.
It's both. It's not either or.
Mm-hmm. You
And they
see,
accept both and they integrate both, and there's a simultaneous as opposed to an either or.
absolutely. I like the term self-awareness a lot, because one of the things which I don't particularly like in the context of coaching is self-improvement. You know, people are so caught with self-improvement that, instead of understanding and accepting oneself, you almost start working and, in making yourself into a better object as to how do I improve all the deficiencies of the object that I am, and how do I, so therefore I like the approach towards, accepting oneself in the simultaneity of the multiple parts of oneself. So as I said, from me, coaching has only two dimensions. One is self-acceptance, to accept yourself with all the multiple facets of yourself. And second is acknowledge the fluidity of the self. The self has enough fluidity to be able to adjust, respond to the various, but we block that fluidity. So how do I, as a coach, unblock that fluidity of the self? To me, that's, in my book, that's the essence of coaching.
Yes, I think that's great. Let's move to the next slide.
Okay, the next slide only very briefly shows about the various ways in which Hume is deployed.
So what can you tell us? This is from inclusion and diversity management as an assessment for recruiting and competency, for executive coaching and mentoring, for
That's
leadership development, team building, organizational development or institution building, relationships, and business strategy.
Yeah. See, like typically some of the things would be often what we do, and I think that's one of the major usages of the Hume framework, is conducting top management retreats, where we ask all the significant 8-9 members to fill in both Hume O and Hume I. And then we spend time looking at what is their individual and collective perception of where the organization is and where would they like to take it. This is where the entire issue of organization development, OD, strategy, culture study comes, but it includes them in terms of also look at their own individual propensities, because you can't do OD work by, seeing as the organization is out there. You are a member of the organization. You are part of it. What is happening to you is very much, so that's a very significant part in terms of deployment. The second, of course, is in the field of leadership development and coaching, which are interrelated, where you work with individuals both through UMI and UMO. We have also worked with it in various other ways, like for instance, in the area of diversity, we have looked at what are the implications of the various universes in the field of diversity. How would people in various universes engage with diversity? Then, of course, with assessment. And in assessment, essentially, Hume doesn't tell you as to whether this person is, has this competency or not. What the Hume does is, it says, okay, if this is the context, if this is what the requirements are, what are the areas where this person would find easy to negotiate, and what are some of the areas which this person may not find very easy to negotiate. So you always put it in a context. You don't make you don't make statements like this person has great leadership potential and stuff like that. We believe there are different kinds of leaders. So all we can say is, what kind of leader can this person become? So that's by and large the way the Hume framework is used. We have 5 minutes. If there are any other questions or You have again muted yourself, Karen.
Sorry about that. Yes, there's a question that Adam raised around the Hume model as a model for the projections. What about the screen in Hume?
Yeah. Can you say something more about what exactly you mean by the screen in terms of what you take from the world outside?
Maybe
That's
so.
what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And then, see, one of the things that we, okay, let me answer it in my way. Maybe I'm not responding to his question. What we say in Hume is that the critical element in Hume is not self-reflection, but self-reflexivity. The difference is that in self-reflection, you see your picture out there and say, okay, this is who I am. In self-reflexivity, and if this is what he means by the screen inside, we say, okay, what is the lens through which I'm looking at it? What is the nature of the mirror? What is the nature of the inner thing that I have? Because every time I look at myself or the world outside, there is a particular notion that which in a sense is what I have received, and that sense the screen within through which I would be looking at the world. So the entire emphasis is on the lens through which the phenomena is being looked at, not so much on the phenomena.
Yes, so as a follow-up, he says, suggest you look at the enneagram if you do not know yet, know it. There are some similarities in non-linear approach to functioning and self-awareness.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know it too well, but I recognize there are some similarities of whatever little I know about Enneagram.
Yeah. Let's see. Another question raised by Carol. She said, would it be right for me to say that Hume framework is a regression model between the possibilities and would it be a regression model between the possibilities in an individual and the wider community in different universes and the opportunities to be different at the same time?
It's a complex question. I'm not even sure that I've understood it correctly.
Okay, I think what she's saying is, this is what I think she's saying. I think she's saying, is it possible that the individual has all these possibilities? There's the wider community, and then there's these different universes where there are opportunities all integrated.
That's right, yeah.
Or interplaying.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah. And then there are these things open up several choices and possibilities. Some we see, some we don't see. What Hume helps you to see is to expand the vision, both internally and externally. So you expand your own multiplicity, that there is much more to you than you believe. And perhaps there are many, many more things in the environment than you were seeing before. So in that sense, the possible permutations and combinations between and for you to establish an equilibrium with the context, that much increases.
Yeah, and I'm just going to read a statement, ask a question, and then, and Carol said that I interpreted her question correctly. Thank you, Carol. So this is from Kathy. She says, if self is a verb rather than a noun, I guess an organization is too. I work with networks, e.g. community organizing and social movements.
Absolutely, I agree.
Okay.
I totally agree.
Okay, and this will be the last statement question. Adam has come back with awareness within which universes arise is screen more essential. What is looking?
Say that again.
Awareness within universes arise is a screen, or is a screen more essential?
A screen more essential, meaning what?
Oh, he's saying these are two statements. Okay, so awareness within universes
Yeah.
arise. And then the other statement is the screen more essentially what is looking.
The screen is essentially, in terms of, if the way I've understood it, the screen is the way you have, in a sense, taken what has been going on, what you see around, and also what you of yourself you see projected. Let me put it in another way. To me, the idea of the screen is that we first see ourselves in the eyes of the other. And what we see gets imprinted inside. To me, that's the screen on which a certain impression has got, in a sense, got forged. That this has got imprinted on that screen in terms of what I have. So it's a reflection and a reflection back onto oneself. Right? And all our awareness, all our reflexivity is around that we say, okay, this is how I pick up my idea of who I am, this is what is important, etc. All the things which I have taken from that. So unless I'm willing to see what I have taken into myself, it's very difficult to actually be self-reflexive in any meaningful manner.
Yes.
So in that sense, screen is, I would say, is more important.
Okay.
If that's the question.
Yes, I think that is the question. Someone has asked, this is an amazing framework. Are you offering training? How do coaches get certified? How do they use it?
Well, we run programs, certification workshops. In fact, we just finished one about 1 week back on Hume I. So we run two different kinds of workshops. One we run for certifying for Hume I individual. The other we run for Hume organization certification. The next Hume organization is in September. But in order to attend the Hume O certification, you have to be a Hume I certified person. Our belief is that you must understand Hume I before you can work with Hume O. Yes. Hume I is the basic mother instrument or the mother framework. So yes, we do run certification workshops.
Okay, so we'll probably share that information. I'm sure Magna will put that on the Coacharya site so that people who want more information can get it. And as we close...
And incidentally, Coacharya people get some discount on the fees.
Oh, that's good. Yes, well, we'll definitely...
Thank Ram for that.
Yes. So we want to thank you, Ashok. This has been very enlightening, very engaging, and we've learned so much. So we'll post the certification that you're going to be running in September, along with the slides and the CCEUs. And I also want to bring everyone's attention that we're going to hold a series on Eastern philosophy and coaching starting on August 8th. So we encourage you to continue to visit our website and blogs to learn more about that. So Ashok, I just want to thank you once again for an amazing session. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the coming years.
Thank you, Karen. You have been most helpful. I think the way you have kind of put the questions together. Thank you very much, and for helping me also understanding the questions which I've sometimes that I didn't. And thank you everyone for being participating so actively and making it into. I enjoyed this session thoroughly. Thank you, Karen, and thank you everyone.
Thank you everyone. Have a good night, a good afternoon, or a good morning wherever you are. Thank you.
Bye-bye.